Hello, all. This is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3. And in this particular video, I want to talk to you about how to actually become more creative and how creativity might actually impact innovation. So, if you don't know me, I'm an associate professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship. And I created this whole reciprocity project that I wanted to give back as much as I possibly can. There were so many people that helped me out that I wanted to pay the favor forward and help you out as much as I possibly can. So the last couple of weeks, I've spent my time brushing up on creativity research for a project that I've been working on. There's a really big body of knowledge on creativity, and it is pretty interesting. However, I haven't covered everything and I haven't read everything, but at the same time, I know a little bit about creativity and innovation within the particular domain. So what I want to talk about in this video is really thinking about, how do you actually become more creative? What can you actually do to become creative? Because we all are thinking like that, right? So first of all, what does creativity mean? Creativity is really distinct from innovation. You need creativity to be innovative and to build innovation. However, creativity is fundamentally about the generation of new and useful ideas, right? So it's thinking of new ideas that can be applied or that they actually have some sort of use within the environment, right? So that's a really important thing to think about, is that it's about this novelty where it's different than what we already have. And how different, well, that just varies, and it's not clear and how different it has to be in terms of being a creative idea. Obviously, the more the more novel it is, the more different it is from the sort of current base of knowledge, the more the more creative it's going to be, and the more sort of combination of that this is really different, but it's like crazy useful. The more sort of a creative idea that it's going to be, right? So innovation, however, is really fundamentally about solving problems that we have by creating some sort of new form of, whether it's knowledge, creating some sort of new knowledge base and how to actually view the world, or changes the way that we view the world, creating a new tool. Often we think about innovation in terms of tools, products, and services. But it also could be like a new process that actually gets created, right? So we create a new way of doing something. So it's kind of really knowledge based, but it's really about these solving problems that we have, our own and other people's problems that we have, and coming up with something that is different, but it also serves a problem, right? It's more, so the difference between creativity and innovation is creativity is less, doesn't encompass as much in terms of the process, but innovation encompasses a lot of stuff, right? So you need to have that creative idea, but then you have to figure out a way to implement it. You have to figure out a way to, maybe craft it and build it and then commercialize it. So it's just, creativity is kind of one input in terms of getting around some of these things. So you need creativity to do the problem solving aspect of things. However, sorry, my doggy, just one second. Izzy, shush. Izzy, that's enough. Okay, so she just saw a mailman outside. Okay, Izzy. All right, so in terms of, how do you become more creative? Sorry, it's kind of a goofy thing to have in the background, but she loves sitting back there. She loves to sit. Izzy, come here. Izzy. Come here. Izzy, come here. Izzy, come here. Come on. Come here. Let's show everybody. Come here. Here's Izzy. Come on up. This is Izzy. Everybody knows Izzy. She's going to come by. She was just looking over there. Okay, so coming back to, sorry about that weird pause. That's awkward, isn't it? Okay, in terms of, how do you actually build creativity if you want to become a more creative person? It's unclear whether you want to be a creative person or not at this moment. I would say in terms of, whether you actually want to be too creative or not creative enough. So you probably want, as far as I'm concerned, and sort of basics of this, you probably want to be somewhat creative, but somewhat not creative, because if you're too creative, people think that you're kind of oddball. And if you're not enough creative, then people just don't think you're generating enough ideas. Izzy, shush. She's settled down, I hope, now. Okay, that's the problems with dogs these days, right? Okay, so in terms of what I would suggest in terms of building creativity is, first of all, you have to try to ignore convention as much as you can, and it's hard to do that within, maybe you're in an organization, maybe you are, maybe you're in a university right now, maybe you're in a class, maybe you are in, fifth grade at this moment. It's really hard to ignore conventional stuff and the things that are going on around you. We have social norms that tell us that we should abide by what other people are doing, and that's going to be really, really tough. And what's likely going to happen is that people are going to be very dismissive of your ideas, and they are just not going to see what you're about, especially the more conventional people, or the people that they get pulled into the social norms a lot more. And so if your ideas are particularly unusual, either you're going to be discounted as kind of a crazy nut, or that your ideas will just not be noticed because they're so unusual and so weird that people just don't regard those particular things. So first of all, don't worry about what other people are doing. That's going to be the hardest thing for you to do in terms of being creative. And I guarantee most people are going to chicken out when they start doing this. So the other thing, and a good practice to do this, is to do what is called breaching experiments. And I think the guy's name is Garfield. And he went out and actually did what are called breaching experiments, where you go out into the wild and you do kind of weird things and weird experiments that are going against social norms, and see if you can withstand those things, right? So go into a store without a t-shirt on. Go into a store walking backwards, things like that. And if you can deal with the social pressure, or your perceived social pressure, with those very simple things, you could probably be creative. It's going to be difficult to do that, though, I guarantee it. So the second thing is to try to find your state of flow, however you can get into that particular state of flow, right? So Mikhail, I always get his name wrong. It's a long, I think he's Czechoslovakian. Anyways, it starts with a C. I'm going to pronounce it wrong, so I'm not going to go there. But social psychologist that talks about the creativity, or the flow you feel, and it's really this out of body experience that you feel when you're in writing or doing a task or doing something that you're really involved in. You feel really excited about that particular thing, right? So when you're doing that, and we've all had this experience, right? So you feel like your hands don't exist. Right now, I'm kind of in a state of flow because my whole body is kind of feeling like it's not there, but I'm talking to you, right? So it's kind of a weird feeling like that you want to get into that state of flow. And that's where a lot of creativity comes from. There's, not as much as known as I would hope in terms of how this all works. But, we do know that this kind of state happens. And if you can get into that state, so being in a quiet room, for example, sometimes if you're not that kind of quiet person, an introverted person, maybe you need a loudness or, conversation, things like that. It's going to help in terms of you getting into that state of flow. So the other thing that you can do is to try to get into a yes and logic rather than a negation logic. I think I've talked about this before on this channel, is trying to get into the moment where you see somebody proposes an idea, or you have your own idea, and you're like, well, the response that you can do, first of all, is you could say, well, that's a terrible idea. Well, that shuts down that idea altogether. What you should be looking at is like, oh, that's an interesting idea. Let's see if we can build on that. So you are trying to develop, for example, you're trying to develop a new business, and your new business is you want to do something like yard maintenance. Well, there's lots of people that are doing yard maintenance. Well, you can say, well, maybe I want to do yard maintenance and, looking after dogs at the same time. Well, there's lots of people that do that at the same time. Well, then you say, well, maybe I want to do yard maintenance for people that are only looking after I don't know, farm animals, for example. Maybe they need farm work that's being done. I don't know, whatever it is. So that's the way that you sort of play this game, is you're constantly building on what you're doing rather than tearing it down. And after a certain point, once you develop something that's okay enough, then you can start tearing it down and sort of trimming the idea and making it a little better going forward, right? So the next thing is to build in psychological safety into your surroundings, to do things that are creative and unusual, right? So psychological safety is kind of this feeling where you feel comfortable of speaking up, whether you have problems, and telling other people your kind of oddball suggestions, right? And if you can do that, if you can create an environment where that's okay to do that without people holding back, you can really create a very nice environment where people are going to come up with some really interesting ideas, without that feeling of being pulled back. And the more that you can do that, build that psychological safety, try to build in that sort of culture where people don't do weird looks at other people. Those weird looks really do matter in terms of whether people are going to propose interesting or different quirky ideas. So if you can do those things and build in a culture where it's just like, yeah, that's interesting, I can get it, I can see what you're doing, that's going to go a long ways in terms of what you're actually trying to accomplish with creativity, particularly with teams, or organizations. That's going to be really, really important. The other thing is to, and this is, and I'm blanking on the guy's name, he's at University of Washington, St. Louis. And if you can build in decision-making processes and bureaucracy within your organization, so we assume often that we don't want bureaucracy if we want creativity, right? That's going to stifle it. But however, what you often want to do is have some sort of organizational structure to allow for disputes, and that sort of resolves disputes when they happen, right? So part of creativity and part of ideas is that they're not always correct, and they're not always going to be, there's not always going to be a right answer, right? So sometimes you propose things that you have multiple good answers that are, they're okay, right? Everybody is happy with those. And so you need somebody to take charge. And whether you're working in a group, maybe you have 3 people and you all have 3 different sort of really okay ideas, and everybody has it, yeah, that's okay, we can run with it. You need one person or a voting mechanism, for example, to vote on the one that everybody prefers, so you can move forward and drop the other ones. Even though that they're all probably equally good, you just need something to keep the ball going and keep conversations, keep ideas rolling when you get into those sort of moments that are there. And, what I want you to also acknowledge is that innovation, creativity and innovation is a really complex process, and we don't know that much about it. However, in terms of both of these processes, I would say that it is inherently more political, than you would imagine it to be, and you really need an audience to build your idea, whatever it is that you have, in order for it to become useful and for it to actually have sort of bigger impact than what you'd actually like it to have, right? So one component of having ideas is they're just ideas. But if you don't have an audience, you don't have what is called the political coalition within your organization, a group of people that are going to be responsive to your particular ideas, they're just not going to go anywhere. So the idea that political influence and things along those lines don't matter when you're a creative person, it's not necessarily all that true. And so you should be doing things, so if you're a freelance creative kind of person, do things like YouTube videos, do things like putting out a web page and repeatedly doing things, a blog and stuff like that. That's how you build an audience. It takes a long time. I'm not discounting that it's going to be easy. The timeline that I want you to imagine is it's going to be 10 years by the time you actually sort of start getting traction with any of these things. I know it's a long time, but you really have to sort of think in that sort of time dimension before you get traction on these things. And if you're in an organization, you have some advantages because there is sort of mechanisms that allow you to navigate some of these things. So you have to build what is called political coalitions within the organization. not necessarily a bad thing. It's just kind of like the reality, the sort of norms that are out there in an organization, is that there is politics that happens, and so you have to embrace some of that or build groups that will be responsive to what you're doing. And so that doesn't take over. That's not a very quick thing to do, right? So building a political coalition with an organization is still a 5 to 10 year ordeal anyways, by the time people start trusting you and trusting your judgment, and people not discounting what you're doing. So you have to do those kind of things. And a lot of it's just life, right? So we think of these big fancy words, but really it's just doing life, and doing it in a way such that you will have an audience, a receptive group to your ideas in 10 years, that you can actually accomplish some things that you currently have. So you might have creative ideas right now, but you have to keep working at those ideas and keep pitching those ideas over and over and over again, whether you're a freelancer, whether you're creating your own organization, whether you're in an IBM, a Google. You have to do all of these things anyways, so you might as well just kind of get used to that sort of political aspect of things, rather than just saying, it's up to the rest of the world to do those kind of things. So just build that into who you are as a person, and you'll start to accomplish a lot more with some of these creative ideas, and they're going to have more usefulness as you do that, in terms of building your creative audience, right? So people are going to be focusing on that, and there's a whole sort of idea right now. There's not a lot of literature and ideas around this, but there's a whole idea of building traction within Silicon Valley, and it basically means that you are just people are starting to pay attention to you, whatever the thing that you're working on, right? That more people are finding you attractive, and that's what you should be working on, such that in 10 years it becomes even more attractive than what you're doing, and then 20 years it becomes even more attractive, right? So you have a larger audience, it becomes much more useful going forward, and that's what you should be looking at and working on. And so that means for you, if you're doing sort of the freelance route, politics, I can get into all of that in an organization, but a lot of it's the same sort of thing. But if you're doing sort of freelancing, you do things like, putting blog posts out all the time, doing social media, things like that, not letting it sort of take over your life, but doing things such that you're getting your name and your ideas that are out there. And in terms of the organization, the sort of being political, it's just being really nice to people. It's not nasty in any sort of way. And that's what I want you to imagine. Politics is not what you imagine it to be, the sort of gaming and one-offmanship. Yeah, that happens, but it's not effective in the long run. It is effective for some people. But in order to be well-liked and well-respected, and be like, Tony Fauci, for example, right? Everybody respects that guy, the scientist that's out there that is vouching for the coronavirus at this moment. So that's what you want to be, is the person that everybody trusts. And if you can get to that moment where, in 30 years where everybody is trusting you, you've won the game. And that is an ultimate amazing thing to do. And then you could pitch any creative idea, and people are going to pay attention to that. So that's all I'm going to talk about today. I sort of defined creativity, defined innovation, and then I went into how you can do some things to make yourself more creative. Ignoring convention, hard to do, but you got to practice it every single day. Try to get into state of flows as much as you can. Do the yes and logic, build in psychological safety in the people around you and with the organization that you have, and build in a bureaucracy or build in decision processes or organizational designs such that you can navigate conflicts when they do happen. So if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, do subscribe to the YouTube channel, take care, and have a wonderful day. Bye.